Today we're going to hear about the role of the private sector in protecting and helping private well owners. It is estimated that over 300,000 Arizona residents receive their drinking water from private wells. These wells do not have any regulatory sampling requirements. There are a few state programs designed to help well owners. While these programs are a great resource, they are limited by funding, staffing, large areas to cover, and in some instances, a mistrust of the government. For those who want to know more about their domestic water quality, there is the do-it-yourself route, which generally entails searching the web, or to work with a private entity. There are a few private water testing companies in central Arizona that can meet the needs of private well owners. In many cases, what prompts a sampling event is a real estate transaction, a noticeable change in water quality, or someone consuming the water becomes sick. Water testing companies can report what is in their water and provide guidance in obtaining treatment. One of the greatest challenges is how to make private well owners aware of the importance to sample their wells and why working with an expert is beneficial, leading to long-term safe drinking water. So today, telling us all about this, we have Don Ascoli. He formed Rim Country Water Testing in 2007 and became the public water system operator for his small community of Verde Glen, 15 miles north of Payson. The responsibility of being the certified water operator for one public water system has grown to now being the water operator for 15 small water systems. Over the years, he saw a need to look at and test private wells in the area. Since forming Rim Country Water Testing, the company has tested over 200 private wells and has collected a database full of private well water quality. I was fortunate enough to meet Don in Albuquerque when we both spoke for a conference, and we realized we were both here in Arizona.
That's right.
And we were
in Gila County.
So we're just so blessed to have you here today, and really lucky to hear about this. And we will be posting this all on our website. And hopefully, as we get more connected with local businesses, more people will be more connected with you and figure out how to help the private wells here. So Don, go ahead and tell us all about it.
Well, thank you, Victoria, for inviting me. And thank you, Tom, for getting everything set up here.
Sure.
I'm pleased to be here in Globe, Arizona, my second home in the county. Over the years, I've traveled many times down to Globe. I used to be the chairman of the Gila County Planning and Zoning Commission. So I would meet here at the courtroom. Anyway, today I'm here to talk about water. You know the famous phrase, beer is for drinking and water is for fighting. That is getting truer by the year. I'm going to focus my talk today to the private well owners. Public sector, public water systems already have regulations and connections in hand on how to deal with the water, the perfection of the water, safety of the water, make sure it's healthy to drink. It's a different story on private wells, so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to try this guy. Okay. So Payson, Arizona, if you look at this nice map of Arizona, is about the center of the state. And my presentation today will be based on my experiences mostly within a 35-mile radius of Payson, Arizona. So, as Victoria already said, I started in 2007. There was a water operator for the public water system, Verde Glen Water Company, that we got our water from. And the operator moved, I raised my hand, and I became the operator for that little system. And I also went across the river, East Verde River, up north of Payson, about 12, 13 miles. So while I was doing this, a neighbor of mine had a well and asked me, could you test my well? I understand you test wells, and I did that. And over time, built that up. And real estate agents, because there were people who were buying properties up there, properties that own wells, question was asked, can I have my water tested? In the case of VA and FHA loans, that is a requirement. They have to be tested before the transfer of property can be completed. So that's how I got my feet wet. I got it. So sometime, what causes the need, is at some point, a private well operator needs their water tested. And what are the key factors that cause that? Well, it don't work. Okay. Anyway, comes as a result of the change in the water quality. The color changes. All of a sudden, they get a little brown or orange tint. Someone becomes sick from drinking their well water. And I got to tell you, I got a call yesterday. A lady bought property 3 years ago, and she's having trouble. She seems to be getting back and forth sick, and she's not sure if it's the water. She's never had her well tested, never. And which is, you shouldn't. Those of us in the business, we know that, but she had no clue. Just know that when she bought the house, it had a well on it, and when it turned the faucet, water came out. But someone becomes sick, and they want to find out about it, or they're selling the property, and it triggers a requirement to have the water tested. That creates the start of the need. So I have, over time, tested many wells, now about 300 in that area that you saw, and I'm finding 15 to 20% of those wells are failing for coliform bacteria. I call it bacteria for short. So it became obvious as I started seeing this that they have no idea. Private well owner has no idea how to get their water tested, or they should test it. That's the other issue. So what are the issues faced when trying to reach the well owners? Well, there are some state testing programs for private well owners, but I have to tell you they're few, far between, and the funding is not there, just not there. So it really is the responsibility of the private well owner to get the test done. They don't realize that they actually own a water utility. They know when they go to Phoenix, they go to Mesa, they go to Globe, they go to Payson, have no problem drinking water in a restaurant, in a store, or whatever, because they know somebody's taking care of it, making sure it's right. But when they go home, they drink water out of a well, they have no idea what they're drinking. All they know is most of the time they can look through it and they can see the sunlight come through. But they own a utility. It's called the water utility with one customer themselves. So even though it's one customer, it needs to be treated just the same, because water is water. It doesn't matter where the source is. It needs to be, we need to be sure what we put in our bodies are safe and clean to drink. So in my experiences over the years, since 2007, there have been several people that says, I don't need to have my water tested. It's clear, and I'm still standing. So that's their test procedure. Well, that's not true. There are people out there, particularly seniors, that don't have the funds to pay for water tests. So even if they have identified the need, and they're trying to find a person or a company to do it for them, even the cost can become prohibitive to them. I've had that happen a few times in my experience. Definitely, there's a lot of people who own wells that don't want anyone testing because they associate that with the government, keeping a record of what's going on, and that is not something they're into. So they'd rather avoid their water being checked, tested, rather than have a test that they think is tied to a government. Well, fortunately, there are people who break through that ice, that barrier, one way or the other. And typically I get a call. I'll give you the freshest one I got yesterday. The lady, I'm gathering from the phone call, probably 60s or early 70s, bought the property in off of Line Springs Road, which is to the east of Payson on Highway 260. And she had, admitted that she never had the water tested. Been there 3 years. They drank the water, her and her husband. But this recent few months, as I understand it, she's getting sick. And she's been doing things to eliminate that as a potential cause. She's changed her diet. She went through a little litany of changes in her lifestyle. And now she's down and saying, you know what, I haven't checked my water. And so she contacted the town of Payson Water Department. They are aware that I am available and do this very function. And so they gave her my number, because I typically ask people, how'd you find out about me? I'm always curious how they find out about me. And that was a call. And so we talked through what she was finding and seeing in her water. I explained on the phone what we're going to do. So we explained to the well owner what tests should be performed and what their purpose is in characterizing the quality of water. So I went through and explained that to her. And I think she definitely walked away with a lot more knowledge than when she first made the phone call. And she totally concluded I need to do this. So when I go out to the well site, or actually another person works with me in this, we collect the water samples to do the kind of tests we identified. And once in a while we see something on site that causes us to make a change, but typically the description from the customer on the phone tells us where to go, what direction. We try and provide some literature, and I have 2 pieces of literature over here that I brought, and I'll leave with Victoria to hand out at maybe your next meeting. Neither one is mine. One is from the state of New York, and it goes all through. In fact, I'm going to, excuse myself real quick. I want to read the titles. So the first one is coliform bacteria in drinking water supplies, put out by the New York State Department of Health. In my years of looking for information, and there's a ton of it on the web, I found this brochure put out by the state of New York on water. It's one of the most concise summaries of what is coliform, what do you test if you have a positive, you test for E. coli and other stuff. Is it harmful? When should I test? What do the results mean, etc. So I'm providing this to the individual well owner. And this comes out from the private well class. This is out of the state of Illinois. This might be new to you, Victoria, maybe. Is your well water safe? And in here, I talk about step one, get your well water tested. 2, follow these best practices to protect your well. The testing is one thing, but you got to maintain if you find it. And then learn how your well works and how to solve problems. People, there are some people who are a little more handy, and if they just knew how to do something, it would sell them maybe a lot of money. So I'm going to leave these with Victoria so you guys can go through it. But I think it's a nice, plain English explanation of what we're looking for, the major failure mode of water, well water is bacteria, and what you should do as a private well owner. Okay. After I get the samples to the lab, we get a test results. I provide those to the customer verbally. In the case of coliform bacteria, that's a 24-hour test at a lab. I only go to certified labs, and I get a verbal call from the lab telling me if it passed or failed. So I can pass it on right away. Typically, the written report, unless you got to rush it, and once in a while, particularly in a real estate sale, they want a written report. So I have to have the lab expedite their process and create the report, and there's usually a rush fee in that. So if you are thinking about getting your well tested, allow a few days in advance before you have to get the final results. And then what we want to do is notify the customers on an annual basis that you need to get it redone again. This, you probably can't see this, this can be tight. This is an example of a letter I send out to the private well owner after we've collected the samples, got the test results, and the hard copy report from the lab. And basically I'm simply saying, here's the report attached on a day where we took it, kitchen faucet. In this case, this was for an FHA loan. That's this particular customer. They had to get it done before they could transfer property. And they require bacteria tests, nitrate, and lead tests. So the California bacteria E. coli came out absent. That meets both state and federal limits for bacteria in drinking water. The second group that we did was nitrates, nitrites, and lead. And you see here's lead, came in at 0.00075 versus 0.15, way under the limit, the federal limit. Nitrates 4.3 versus the limit of 10, and the nitrates were less than 0.1. So they now have a record. That owner has a written record of a test done at a certain time, meeting these parameters. And so one, they can get the confidence, particularly in this example, that their water is safe to drink. And what I, again, try to explain to the well owner, try and do it once a year so that you can build a record of your water quality, not only for your own personal peace of mind, but also if you decide to sell and they're looking at a couple houses with wells, the person that can produce a record of, hey, I've tested it for 5 years and it's passed every time, that gives the buyer a little more confidence in choosing maybe your home with your well. Okay, so again, to boil what has been learned over the years, according to my last run with the Arizona Department of Water Resources, they indicate in that radius approximately 769 private wells. They don't have registered all the wells. I fudge there's at least 20% of the wells that are not registered. I try and get a well number when I visit with a customer, a resident, a homeowner, and some of them registered, they don't even know. They don't get the paperwork. It doesn't get transferred from the realtor, the prior owner, whatever. But so in my process, I'm assuming 20% were not registered. So we got 923 wells when I did this study in that 35-mile radius. Private wells we're talking about, get private. My company has tested over 207. Actually, we hit over 300 since this slide was made. So we've got good 30% sampling of private wells in that radius. And we're testing for coliform bacteria. And I'm trying to, we just did one up in Flowing Springs, which is about 2 miles north of Payson. And the one I'm going to test that I mentioned earlier, she was having health issues in one of the water. If they've never tested for nitrates, I request that we test for nitrates as well, one time. Then if you get a result, that data is probably good for 4 or 5 years before you retest that one. The bacteria test, you need to do it at least once a year. So of all the wells we tested, 61 have failed for coliform bacteria, 23% of the wells. That's a high number. A lot of those, the solution for that is to sanitize the well. Mm-hmm. We had one that went all the way to E. coli. Typically, when they fail for coliform bacteria, but they're clean on E. coli, which is a much more serious matter, and that's good. But the coliform bacteria, again, is a signal that there could be something else in the water. Nitrates, I had 8 failures, and 6 were what I call the high side of 5 to 10 ppm. Observations. So again, kind of summaries, we've been able to reach and test around 25% of the private wells in that 35-mile radius, but I'd like to reach more. And that's part of the reason for talking is ways of doing it. Again, I'm just repeating that the bacteria, along with nitrates, are the 1 and 2 issues why they fail. Yeah, we've had some arsenic. Yes, we did. I had a client in Pine, terrible iron bacteria issue. Yeah. Oh, terrible. They could look at replacing the whole pipeline. It's 55 years old. 55 years old, and the lady was noticing that they have red stuff in their water, and it settles at the bottom. And her dad, who is 80 years old, lives in another house off the same line. She wants to clean it up. So right now, without more involvement from the government and help, partnership, whatever, which we have talked about in the past, that really we need to carry to the next step. without the government involved, it's a little more of a challenge how the people could do this, communicate with people who have the need, the people who own the private wells. So, but we do know on the ones we touch, they come back and say, hey, I'd like you to do this annually for me. They have obviously in their own mind come to the, what I call the right conclusion that I need to take this seriously. That's just not the fact that I don't have to pay a water company for water. That's true. I'm paying myself electric and whatever, but it's more than just electricity. It's the quality and the safety of the water that is more likely could be a little more expensive, but very important. But in my contact with these private well owners, they are learning more. They're learning more about that well, what to do to take care of it, what should I do next. So in conclusion, what's the role of the private sector in helping private well owners get safe drinking water? Education, communication, and imparting knowledge to these private well owners. I have listed here some of the methods that I've done over the years, some more successful than others, but one way that they do work. So I do have a website. It's not, I'm not satisfied with the condition of it, how it plays, but it's amazing how many people who just search the web, because there's more and more people that are becoming web savvy, or at least using it because they don't use the old pages anymore. And they put in pasted water test, and I pop up number one. And there are a couple places, one out of Flagstaff, I believe that another one pops up out of Camp Verde, but there's nobody in the Payson area that pops up. I do know there's a couple other gentlemen that do it on just straight word of mouth. That's how they do it. I'm trying to make people aware that I'm there if they need that help, that service. So I have a website. Join the Chamber of Commerce so you can increase your visibility. That's something a private well testing company can do. Well, I'm a member of the Payson Chamber of Commerce. The Chamber of Commerce typically has a fair every year, business fair, and on occasion I've had a booth there. Sometimes I haven't, but that is another avenue of communicating and increasing the awareness that you're in town or you're nearby. I own a well, maybe we should talk. Advertising in local papers, done that off and on. Conduct presentations with the Board of Realtors, that's an important one. I had a period where I did that pretty regularly. I haven't done it recently, but I'm going to get back into it because that's one of the front lines. One of the big reasons people want to test water is because they're new. They just are buying a piece of property and they want to know. They actually are doing some due diligence. In the state of Arizona, you buy a house that has a septic system, by law, it has to be tested. It has to be pumped and tested. Even though everything is working fine, it has to be done. That means the buyer knows where they're at when they buy that house on the septic side. We don't have such a thing on the front end of water. Person has a well, there is no requirement, hey, a new person's taken over, check the water. Now, FHA and VA do it. USDA does it. But other than those entities, some mortgage companies have it in their rules that they're going to fund a loan. They want to get a picture of what the well quality is. And that's how you do it. Flyers and business cards. I've got some flyers here. I'm leaving with Victoria. I've got some business cards for those who would like to see it. How I can help. I have tested 2 or 3 wells down in the Cobre area. It's not common, and I assume there's some other people locally that does it, but it doesn't really matter who. The important thing is to get the water tested. The big issue is if you as a private well owner realize you need tested, what do? Where do you start? And my recommendation is get with the county health department, get with the town water departments. They most likely know 1 or more individuals or companies that do the very thing that you're looking for. Test my water, tell me if it's good or bad. or what I should be doing going forward here. So that is basically my presentation as far as the needs of a private well owner, what they should be doing or attempt to be doing. There are people, not a ton of them, but there are people out there and companies that will provide that service. And the bigger thing is the education that goes with it, because they run a utility. It is the most important resource that every human needs, water. So we want to make sure what we put on our body, what we drink inside, is safe, clean drinking water.